Welcome to Shatter.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. She said it like it meant nothing. Stop being so needy. The words dropped between us in the middle of a cafe full of people, and for a second, even the sound of milk steaming felt too loud. I just looked at her. No reaction, no argument. Just silence. That was the first moment I realized she wasn't really talking to me anymore. She was performing. For herself, for the people watching, maybe even for the idea of who she thought she'd become. Her name's Emily. My wife. A certified life coach who once used to laugh at my blueprints spread all over the kitchen table. Now she laughs at people who still believe in them. She said she'd outgrown small talk and emotions that didn't vibrate on her frequency. She spent hours on her iPhone, listening to headspace meditations, journaling about alignment, and posting phrases like energy flows where attention goes. I used to bring her blue bottle coffee in the mornings, hoping she'd look up from her screen. She rarely did. That night, after her little public lecture, I drove home in silence. The Lexus IS 350 hummed beneath me, smooth and detached, just like I wanted to feel. At the red lights, I stared at my reflection in the window and didn't recognize the man looking back. I'd built bridges that held tons of steel, but couldn't hold together one conversation with my own wife. At home, she was already on YouTube, watching some retreat guru talk about detachment from the needy masculine. I stood behind her for a moment, just long enough to see her nod in agreement. I didn't interrupt. I didn't ask who she was trying to convince. Later, I sat in my office and opened Notion. I created a new page and titled it, The Exit. It wasn't about leaving her physically. Not yet. It was about leaving the version of myself she'd learned to ignore. I didn't tell her. I didn't need to. Something in my silence that night changed the air between us. She didn't notice, but I did. By morning, she was already gone to another self-discovery workshop. And for the first time, I didn't care. I just opened my laptop, sipped my coffee, and realized. She told me to stop being needy. So I did. The next few weeks felt like watching a movie I'd already seen too many times. Emily drifted from one spiritual intensive to another, always chasing the next version of herself. She spoke less to me and more to her reflection during live sessions. Our house smelled like incense and sounded like an endless loop of motivational podcasts. Even the silence between us began to hum with her new vocabulary, frequency, vibration, energy. One evening, a friend of hers came over, a man named Chase. He was another coach, tall, smiling too much, always quoting something he didn't understand. I noticed how she straightened her posture when he walked in, how her tone softened, how she became a better version of herself in his presence. He called her something only I used to do. I didn't interrupt. I just observed. They sat in the living room discussing emotional alignment. And for a moment, I felt like a stranger in my own house. My hands smelled of steel and oil from the workshop. There smelled of scented candles and herbal tea. The contrast was almost poetic. She was building bridges to nowhere. I was still building real ones. That night, I went back to my Notion page. The Exit. I started adding sections, finances, timeline, new apartment listings near the office. It wasn't revenge, it was recalibration. Every line I typed pulled me further from the man she thought she could lecture. I kept my movements quiet, deliberate. In the mornings, I began leaving before she woke up. I'd stop by Blue Bottle Coffee, sit by the window, and watch the city move without her in it. The first sip tasted like freedom. I'd open my laptop, refine a design for a new suspension bridge, and think about how every structure stands only when tension is perfectly balanced. Maybe that was what we'd lost, balance. Emily started noticing my silence. She'd ask, "Is something wrong?" I'd just nod slightly and say, "No, I'm fine." That answer unsettled her more than any argument could. Because for the first time, it was true. I was fine, just finally distant enough to see her clearly. The proof came quietly, like it always does. Not in a message or a confession, but in a pattern. Emily began spending weekends at retreats just outside the city, digital detoxes, she called them. She said they were for self-discovery, for connecting with her higher self. I didn't ask questions anymore, but I started noticing details. Her phone turned face down during dinner. Her laughter came delayed, rehearsed. She'd return home lighter, glowing almost, but her eyes never met mine. One Sunday, I opened her laptop to check a shared document from her old psychology practice. A notification popped up, an invite to a private YouTube group called the Evolving Partnership. The profile photo showed Chase leading a meditation circle. Emily's name was listed under moderators. She'd never mentioned it. I clicked through, watched a short clip where she spoke about releasing attachment to those who depend on your energy. I didn't need to hear more. It wasn't betrayal in the physical sense. It was worse. It was condescension dressed as enlightenment. That night, I drove the car aimlessly, the soft hum of the Lexus filling the silence she used to occupy. At a red light, I caught my reflection again, still calm, but sharper now. The version of me she'd dismissed as needy had vanished. What remained was focused, observing, calculating. I didn't confront her. I saved screenshots, notes, times, not out of anger, but out of clarity. Each file went into a Notion folder named Structure, a blueprint, not of steel, but of separation. My movements became methodical. I applied for a new apartment, rerouted mail, adjusted accounts. Small, invisible shifts. When she came home that weekend, she talked for an hour about boundaries and rebirth. I just listened, my hands wrapped around a cup from Blue Bottle, its heat fading slower than my patience. She ended her speech with, "I hope you understand this is about growth." I nodded once. She smiled, thinking I agreed. But what she didn't realize was that I finally did, just not in the way she expected. Growth, for me, meant leaving her orbit entirely. And I had already begun. Disappearing wasn't about leaving. It was about becoming unreachable. One morning, I woke up before sunrise and just stopped responding. No message, no call, no explanation. I left my phone on the nightstand, still buzzing from her late-night affirmations. I packed a single bag, 2 Uniqlo shirts, my laptop, and a notebook. By the time she finished her morning meditation, the Lexus was already gliding down the highway, silent, steady, certain. I rented a small apartment near the office, minimalist, clean, predictable. The kind of space where silence wasn't heavy, it was peaceful. I filled my fridge, set up a Notion board for my new projects, and for the first time in months, I felt control return like oxygen. There were no crystals, no sound bowls, no scented candles. Just space. Emily called, then texted, then called again. I didn't block her. I just didn't answer. Every notification that appeared on my screen reminded me how much I'd begged for attention before. Now the roles were reversed. Her words came faster, more frantic. "Are you okay?" became, "Why are you doing this?" And eventually, "Please, can we talk?" At work, my colleagues noticed the change. I was quieter, sharper, focused. I stayed late, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. My designs improved. My mind stopped spinning around her orbit. Every line of steel I drew felt like a line of distance between who I was and who I'd become. Days passed, then a week. Emily posted on YouTube about navigating emotional detachment. I watched it once, just to see. Her voice trembled. She tried to sound enlightened, but the mask cracked between her words. She said, "Sometimes people leave to protect their energy." She didn't realize she was talking about me. That night, I sat by the window with my Blue Bottle coffee, city lights reflecting off the glass. I thought about calling her, just once. Then I didn't, because silence had already said everything I needed. I hadn't left to punish her. I'd left to see who I was without her shadow. And the view from here was clearer than ever. From the outside, it probably looked like I vanished overnight. But in reality, I was more present than ever, just not for her. Distance wasn't my escape, it was my reset. While Emily searched for herself through workshops and circles of people who spoke in riddles, I found myself in the quiet rhythm of ordinary days. Work, gym, coffee, sleep, repeat. Each moment rebuilt me, brick by brick. At the office, they said I seemed different. More grounded, more decisive. I started taking on complex projects again, the kind that used to keep me up until dawn years ago. There was no chaos in my head now, no noise from someone else's crisis. I didn't crave her validation anymore. I didn't crave anything. Then one afternoon, an engineer I knew from another firm stopped by. He was scrolling through his phone, paused, and smirked. "Hey, isn't this your wife?" He turned the screen toward me. It was a photo from an event titled the Conscious Union Workshop, hosted by Chase. Emily stood beside him on stage, smiling like she had found salvation. My chest didn't tighten this time. I just nodded and went back to my notes. I didn't even need to look twice. That evening, I opened Notion again. The folder's structure was complete. I added one last entry, final review. Inside, I dropped a link. It was an anonymous report sent to the organization that funded Chase's events. The attachments spoke for themselves. Falsified client reviews, misused donations, personal messages from participants who'd been manipulated under the label of coaching. Nothing dramatic, nothing emotional. Just facts. Cold, clean, and traceable. I didn't write my name anywhere. I didn't need credit. A week later, the group suspended their activities for internal review. Emily never knew how it happened. I didn't tell her. Watching her world tilt from the outside wasn't satisfaction, it was symmetry. That night, I sat in the car outside my apartment, the engine idling softly. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I just breathed. For the first time in years, I was no longer reacting to her energy. I was directing my own. And that silence, that absolute, controlled silence, was louder than anything she'd ever said. It started unraveling faster than I expected. A few days after the suspension notice, Emily's videos went private. Her group chats went silent. The followers who once flooded her comments with praise began to ask questions she couldn't answer. I didn't need to check her page. People around her did it for me. Even mutual friends mentioned it at work, lowering their voices like they were discussing a scandal. Guess that whole retreat thing wasn't so pure after all, one said. I only shrugged. Emily tried to hold her ground. She posted vague statements about cleansing false energy and starting anew, but it only made things worse. The same people who once saw her as an example now saw her as a warning. She called me once that week. I let it ring out. Then another call came. This time I answered, but I didn't speak. I just listened. Her breathing was uneven. She asked if I knew anything about what happened. I said calmly, I heard about it. That was all. Then silence. She waited for comfort, but I didn't offer any. The next morning, I saw her outside the office building. She looked smaller somehow, her confidence stripped away. She said she wanted to talk, just for a minute. I nodded. She asked, how did you do it? How do you stay so calm? I told her, because I stopped trying to control what's already broken. Her eyes dropped. That was the first time she didn't have a script to hide behind. That evening, I walked into Blue Bottle, ordered the same black coffee, and sat in my usual corner. The hum of quiet conversation filled the space, but for me, it was peace. I opened my laptop, reviewed a new design, and realized how much lighter life felt when it wasn't built around someone else's storm. By the end of that week, Emily deleted her accounts. Chase disappeared from her circle. The house we once shared stood empty, a monument to noise that meant nothing. And me, I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I just drove home, the car slicing through the night, steady as my breath. The world was finally balanced again, and for the first time, I didn't need her to see it. Weeks passed in near silence. I didn't reach out, and she didn't know how to. Emily had built her life around speaking, guiding, advising, correcting. Now there was no one left to listen. I heard from a mutual friend that she'd moved out of our old house, renting a smaller apartment closer to downtown. She'd stopped doing sessions and was looking for something grounded. The irony wasn't lost on me. My life had become routine in the best way. Early mornings, quiet drives, long hours at the office. I liked the rhythm, the control. My space stayed simple. White walls, clean lines, everything in its place. Uniqlo shirts lined up in perfect order. Not a single trace of the chaos she once brought. The silence that used to feel empty now felt earned. Sometimes, I'd see her name pop up on YouTube. Old clips of her speeches resurfacing, people in the comments asking where she went. She never replied. I didn't either. The version of her that existed in those videos wasn't real anymore, just an echo of someone who thought enlightenment came from control. One evening, I got home after a long day, sat down with my Blue Bottle coffee, and opened Notion. I hadn't touched the exit page in weeks. It was complete, but something in me wanted to add one final note. So I typed, distance doesn't destroy connection, it reveals what was never there. I closed the laptop and leaned back, letting the quiet settle. Later that night, a message came through. Emily, just a single line. I missed the version of you who needed me. I stared at it for a long time. then locked my phone and set it face down on the table. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel pity. Only clarity. She had spent months trying to rise above everything real, above need, above love, above consequence. But in the end, all she'd done was float away from herself. I poured another cup of coffee, the steam fogging the glass, and thought, maybe the cruelest kind of revenge isn't leaving someone behind. It's becoming everything they thought you couldn't be without them. A month later, she showed up outside my building. I saw her reflection in the glass door before I saw her face. Hesitant, unfamiliar, like someone searching for a past that no longer existed. I could have walked past her, but something in me wanted closure, not confrontation. She said she just wanted to talk. I agreed, but only for a few minutes. We sat at a small cafe nearby, the kind of place I'd discovered after everything fell apart. The same cafe where I'd once rebuilt myself over quiet mornings and black coffee. She looked around, uncomfortable in the stillness. No background music, no affirmations, no audience. She started with small talk, the kind that used to fill our evenings before everything turned into analysis. Then her tone shifted. She said she'd been doing deep inner work and finally understood what went wrong. I didn't interrupt. I just watched as she tried to package regret into spiritual language. She said, "You withdrew too much. I didn't know how to reach you." I told her calmly, "You asked me to stop being needy." I listened. The words landed like a quiet punch. Her eyes flickered, realizing how deep that line had cut. For a moment, she wasn't a coach or a guide. She was just Emily, small, fragile, human. She tried to explain that she'd lost herself chasing perfection, that she thought independence meant superiority. I didn't argue. I just nodded. Because the truth was, I'd already accepted what she couldn't. Some distances aren't punishment. They're protection. When we finished, I paid the bill and stood up. She asked if we could talk again sometime, maybe start over. I told her maybe, but not from where we left off. She nodded slowly, understanding more than she wanted to. I walked back to my car, the city lights reflecting off its hood like calm water. For the first time, I didn't feel pulled toward her or pushed away, just still, balanced. As I drove home, her last words echoed faintly in my head, but they didn't sting anymore. Because I finally realized, peace isn't what you find after letting go. It's what appears when you stop trying to hold on. After that meeting, the silence between us turned into something heavier, like a truth that both of us could feel, but neither could carry. She didn't call again for a while, but I could sense her presence in small ways. A message left unsent, a glimpse of her profile visiting mine, her old posts disappearing one by one. She was rewriting her story, piece by piece, the same way she once tried to rewrite mine. At work, I kept moving forward. My latest design proposal had just been approved, a new pedestrian bridge, minimalist and strong, built to withstand tension without breaking. I spent late nights refining every detail, and in that precision, I saw myself. The structure I was building wasn't just for the city, it was a reflection of what I'd become. One Friday evening, she showed up again. No makeup this time, no carefully chosen words. Just her. She said she missed our quiet mornings, how I used to bring her coffee, how she always felt safe when I was near. She admitted she hadn't realized what safety felt like until it was gone. I didn't answer right away. I wanted to remember that moment, not for pain, but for clarity. She asked if I could ever forgive her. I said there was nothing to forgive. "You taught me exactly what I needed to learn," I told her. Her eyes watered, not from guilt, but from understanding. She whispered, "I didn't think you'd ever stop needing me." I looked at her and said, "That's why I had to." There was no anger left in me, no satisfaction in her regret, just stillness. We stood there for a while, both realizing how far apart we'd grown, not in miles, but in meaning. When she finally walked away, it wasn't dramatic. She didn't cry, and I didn't stop her. She just turned, quietly, like someone walking out of a dream that no longer made sense. That night, I went home, sat by the window with my coffee, and watched the city breathe. The same skyline, the same lights, but everything looked different. Because for the first time, I wasn't watching her disappear. I was watching myself stay. A few weeks later, I ran into her by chance. It was early morning, the streets still half asleep, the air cold and clean. She was standing outside a small cafe, holding a cup of coffee she probably didn't even taste. When she saw me, she smiled, tired but genuine. There was no makeup, no aura of self-importance, no performance. Just Emily. We talked for a while, nothing heavy. She said she'd started teaching again, but this time small classes, real people, real problems. She said she was learning how to listen. For the first time, I believed her. Then she looked at me and asked quietly, "Are you happy now?" I took a breath before answering. "I'm peaceful," I said. It wasn't pride. It wasn't bitterness. It was just the truth. She nodded slowly, the way someone does when they finally accept they can't rewrite the ending. There was no need for long apologies or promises. We'd already said everything worth saying in our silence. As we stood there, the morning light caught her face, and for a split second, I saw the woman I'd fallen in love with years ago. The one who used to believe in simple things before all the noise. I realized that part of her had never really disappeared. It just got buried under everything she thought she needed to become. She reached out, touched my arm lightly, and said, "You were the calm I didn't know how to keep." Then she stepped back. No tears, no drama, just honesty. And maybe that was enough. I walked to my car, started the engine, and sat there for a moment before driving away. The city was waking up, sunlight spilling between buildings, catching reflections off glass and metal. Everything looked sharper, more defined. I thought about the journey, the words, the silence, the distance. And I understood it now. She hadn't broken me. She'd refined me. As I drove off, her image faded in the rearview mirror. Not erased, just small, like a chapter finally closed. I didn't disappear. I just stopped showing up where I wasn't respected. What would you have done in my place? If the story hit you, leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe. It only gets stronger from here.